Amina knew that finding someone who would be willing to do such an embarrassing task would be very hard. She stood in front of the crowd and asked if any man would come forward to eat her bitter kola. All the men looked at her with disgust and murmured among themselves while laughing, but once upon a time, there lived a very beautiful princess who was the only daughter of a great king. Her name was Amina, and she was greatly loved by her people. Not only was Princess Amina very beautiful, but she was also kind and polite. The villagers all loved her and couldn't understand how a princess could make a common villager feel so important. Princess Amina had a way of making people feel special, and the people always enjoyed being around her. However, not everyone knew the real Amina, as she was a different person behind closed doors. Her palace maids were very scared of her because she would boss them around in her room. Princess Amina would punish her maids for hours and order them to smile as they left her room. They dared not tell anyone about the bad treatment they received, as Princess Amina threatened to harm anyone who spoke ill of her. The princess was very mean and arrogant in her room, unlike the kind and caring princess the entire village knew. One evening, after a long day in the village, the princess returned to her room, feeling tired and hungry. She shouted at her maids to bring her dinner quickly. The maids hurried to bring her food, afraid of what she might do if they were slow. Princess Amina ate the food quickly, not realizing it was very hot. When she felt the heat, she became very angry and ordered her maids to eat the hot food, burning their tongues. She also made them chew raw pepper, causing them great pain. The next morning, Princess Amina was summoned by her father, the king, who told her that the villagers had decided to honor her with the title of the most prestigious maiden in the village. The princess was overjoyed because this title meant she would attract rich princes from neighboring villages who would seek her hand in marriage. This title was highly respected, and Princess Amina was thrilled. Her life was finally going in the direction she wanted, and she couldn't wait for the Festival of Lights, which was a few weeks away, where she would be honored. Princess Amina returned to her room excitedly. Her maid stood in a corner, terrified of making her angry. Later that afternoon, Princess Amina took a walk around the village. The people were delighted to see her as she spoke kindly to them and gave them gifts. Just as she was about to head back to the palace, an old woman who looked very sick vomited at her feet. Princess Amina pretended to be compassionate towards the old woman, who looked at her and said she knew all the terrible things Amina did behind closed doors. The princess was terrified and rushed back to the palace, panicking. She summoned her maids into her room and demanded to know which one of them had told the old woman. Her maids, shaking with fear, swore they had never spoken about it. The princess didn't believe them and ordered them to cut off their tongues to ensure they would never speak again. Princess Amina felt a twisted sense of satisfaction as she watched her maids in pain. Now, no one will ever know what I have done, she said to herself, smiling mischievously. Days passed, and several young men from the village came to the palace to declare their intentions to marry the princess, but Princess Amina dismissed them all without a second thought. She believed she was destined for a grander match, one that would bring great wealth and prestige to her family. One day, a young businessman from a nearby village came to ask for Princess Amina's hand in marriage. Many considered him a perfect match for the princess, but she barely listened to his heartfelt proposal before rejecting him with a cold smile. "My future lies with someone far richer and more powerful than you," she said dismissively as she walked away. The villagers, who adored Princess Amina, began to whisper among themselves, wondering why the princess had refused to choose a suitor. Little did they know the elders had decided to honor her with the title of the most prestigious maiden in the village. As the day of the festival approached, Princess Amina became increasingly nervous, eagerly awaiting the honor from the elders. She envisioned her life after the ceremony, with rich princes flocking to win her heart. The thought filled her with excitement, and she couldn't wait for sunrise. That night, Princess Amina went to bed excited. A few hours later, she woke up to find herself kneeling on the floor, surrounded by the village elders who looked at her with confusion. The spirits had chosen her as the face of nights, meaning she possessed the darkest heart in the village. The spirits chose someone whose heart was wicked and presented them in black before the elders to be used to cleanse the village of all its wrongdoings. The chosen one would be paraded around the village, dressed in black, with people singing and beating drums, purging their own sins by projecting them onto the chosen one. It was a tradition meant to cleanse the village from all its wrongs. Princess Amina was horrified. She had always prided herself on being kind and loving, never believing her true nature would be revealed. Now, she stood in front of the village elders, dressed in black, her heart pounding with fear and shame. By morning, the villagers gathered, whispering in disbelief as the announcement was made. The kind and beautiful Princess Amina, the king's only daughter, had been chosen as the face of nights. The entire village was shocked as they watched their beloved princess, dressed in black, being paraded through the village. As the villagers sang and drummed, releasing their sins and dark thoughts, Princess Amina walked slowly, her head bowed, feeling the weight of her actions and the judgment of her people. Her father watched with sorrow, unable to save her, knowing any attempt to do so would lead to their deaths. As the procession continued, Princess Amina reflected on all the terrible things she had done. The chants and drumming, meant to cleanse the village, began to cleanse her as well. She realized how terrible she had been and knew she needed to change if she ever wanted to be accepted again. After the ceremony, Princess Amina was taken to an abandoned hut at the edge of the village. She was to remain there for a year, reflecting on her actions and seeking forgiveness from the spirits. Only after this period of isolation could she return to prove she had truly changed. The princess lived in seclusion for a year, stripped of her title and living as a commoner, tending to her own needs. The entire village kept away from her, as their tradition forbade them from mingling with the chosen one. During this time, the princess regretted how she treated her maids, who had always made her life easier. Doing things by herself made her appreciate her maids and wish she had treated them better. When the year was over, Amina returned to the village, transformed. However, she still had one more task to perform to live among her people again. This last task required her to find a man willing to eat her bitter Kola to vouch for her and stand in the gap between the spirits and herself, swearing that she had truly changed and learned from her mistakes. In cases like this, the man who stood in for her would be obligated to marry her, ensuring she lived up to her promise. Amina knew that finding a man willing to do such a humiliating task would be difficult. She stood in front of the crowd and pleaded for any man to come forward and eat her bitter Kola. All the men looked at her with disgust, murmuring and laughing. Amina stood there with her head bowed, feeling the judging eyes of the men who were unwilling to humiliate themselves for her. Just as she was about to give up, a young man stepped forward and said he was willing to take up the task. The people froze in shock as they watched the young man step forward to volunteer. Amina, too, could not believe her ears. She was shocked to see a man willing to go through such humiliation just to save her. This single act taught the princess that true kindness and humility can exist in even the most unexpected places. The young man's name was Akeem. He was a humble farmer known for his generosity and gentle nature. The villagers whispered among themselves, amazed by his bravery. Akeem ignored the crowd, took the bitter Kola from Amina and ate it without hesitation. The village elders, moved by Akeem's act of bravery, declared that the spirits were now appeased, and Amina was allowed to return to the village. Amina's father, the king, ensured that she lived comfortably as a commoner. But she was no longer allowed to live in the palace. Instead, she moved in with Akeem, who, despite his modest means, treated her with kindness and respect. Slowly, Amina began to see the value of humility and hard work. She apologized to her former maids, asking for their forgiveness. Although they had been hurt deeply, they saw the genuine remorse in Amina's eyes and forgave her. Amina and Akeem worked side by side in the fields, and she learned to appreciate the simple joys of life. As days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, Amina found herself falling in love with Akeem. His selflessness and gentle spirit touched her heart in ways she had never known. She realized that true happiness did not come from wealth or titles, but from the love and respect of those around her. The village began to see the change in Amina. She was no longer the arrogant princess they once knew, but a kind and hardworking woman who had learned from her past mistakes. The villagers slowly started to accept her back into their community. One day, while Amina and Akeem were working in the fields, they noticed a commotion at the village square. Curious, they went to see what was happening. There, they found the village elders gathered, looking worried. The king had fallen ill, then none of the healers could cure him. Amina felt a pang of guilt and concern. Despite everything, he was still her father. She knew she had to do something to help him. She remembered an old herbalist who lived deep in the forest, known for her miraculous cures. Without hesitation, Amina and Akeem set off to find the herbalist, hoping to save the king. Their journey through the forest was long and treacherous. They faced many challenges, but together they overcame each one, their bond growing stronger with each step. Finally, they reached the herbalist's hut, and Amina explained their situation. The herbalist listened carefully and agreed to help, but she warned that the cure would not be easy to prepare. It required rare ingredients that could only be found in the most dangerous parts of the forest. Amina and Akeem, determined to save the king, agreed to gather the ingredients, no matter the risk. As they ventured deeper into the forest, they encountered wild animals and treacherous terrain. They faced each challenge with bravery and determination, knowing that their mission was too important to fail. Along the way, they discovered hidden strengths within themselves and each other. Finally, after many days, they gathered all the ingredients and returned to the herbalist. She prepared the cure and handed it to Amina with instructions on how to administer it to the king. Amina and Akeem hurried back to the village, hoping they were not too late. When they arrived, they found the king's condition had worsened. The entire village was gathered outside the palace, waiting anxiously. Amina rushed to her father's side and administered the cure as the herbalist had instructed. The villagers watched in silence, their hopes pinned on the success of the cure. Slowly, the king began to show signs of recovery. His breathing steadied, and his fever broke. The villagers erupted in cheers, grateful for the miracle. Amina's heart swelled with relief and joy. She had not only saved her father but had also proven to her people that she had truly changed. As the king regained his strength, he called for Amina and Akeem. He thanked them for their bravery and selflessness, and he acknowledged the transformation in his daughter. The king realized that true leadership came from humility and kindness, not just power and titles. He decided to restore Amina's title as a princess, but this time she would rule alongside Akeem, bringing their shared values of compassion and respect to the kingdom. The villagers rejoiced, knowing that their future was in good hands. If you have learnt any lesson from this story of Amina the hideous princess, please share your thoughts in the comments section. To our returning viewers, we say thank you, and if you had not subscribed, please press the subscribe button to subscribe. Also like and share to your friends and family. We all have something to learn from this. Thank you once again for watching. Bye for now.